Alright, we just got episode 4 of The Mandalorian Season 3, and while I did have some issues with the episode's execution, there were some really interesting lore tidbits that I want to break down, and we're going to start right away with full spoilers, so buckle up, get a drink, and let's talk about it. So, right off the bat, we see more megafauna in this episode of The Mandalorian. They seemingly moved into space Australia, perhaps to get away from the prying eyes of the New Republic and the Empire, perhaps to test their mettle as they're training. Anyway, we see young Vizsla kidnapped by a massive, Aerodactyl from Pokemon, and it turns out that this is a Shriekhawk. Now, this is very interesting because a Shriekhawk is actually a native species to Mandalore. Not only that, but the creature is used as the sigil, not only for Death Watch, but also Clan Vizsla. So that tells us a few things. For one, the Mandalorians are probably on a planet in the Mandalorian system, or they're somewhere where a prior Mandalorian group settled and brought Shriekhawk with them. Either way, very interesting and a bit of insight into why they are there. However, when rewatching the episode a second time, I noticed that the armor says specifically, Paz Vizsla, enjoin the Shriekhawk training team to accompany you. So not only are the Mandalorians aware of these creatures, but they've made some efforts to actually capture and train some. Now, that's interesting because it also gives us more insight into why they bothered taking the babies back at the end. This season has been really big, obviously, in showing and exploring the symbols of Mandalorian culture, so it's kind of interesting that we got more of that in this episode, even though, to be honest, I'm a bit over the gigantic beasts in this season. Hopefully we don't see too much more of that. I will say the chase cam at the end was really great visually. I like the shaking camera, almost seemed like it was struggling to keep up with the beast as it was flying through the canyons. That being said, other parts I felt like didn't make a ton of sense. Like, why would you camp out when the thing has your child and is probably going to feed it to its young? They got very lucky that it was willing to hold on to it in its gullet for 12 hours. It's also just a bit weird that the child walks away to the beach and just instantly gets grabbed by this thing. Either way though, it seemed pretty clear that it was just an opportunity for Grogu to get some time with the armorer, which brings me to my next point. We've now learned how Grogu survived at least the opening portions of Order 66. I'm sure a lot of you recognize this character, most likely because of the actor who played him. Grogu was rescued by Kelleran Beck, an individual portrayed by former Jar Jar Binks actor Ahmed Best, and people were really happy to see this, including myself, because Ahmed Best had such a rough go with Star Wars. He's been open about the fact that he considered committing suicide because of all the fan backlash he got. He's recently been sort of re-embraced by the fandom, especially as a lot of us prequel kids are getting older. Either way, really great to see him in the role. He originally appeared in Star Wars Jedi Temple Challenge, which was a YouTube game show, sort of like Legends of the Hidden Temple. But in that show, as mentioned, he was Kelleran Beck, a Jedi Master. He was called the Sabered Hand for good reason, as we saw in this episode, and it's quite interesting because in the past, Ahmed Best has played other characters in Star Wars. Most notably, there was Ahmed Beck, and there's sort of a weird connection there because in Star Wars Legends, there's actually a story where Ahmed Beck steals one of Padme's shuttles, and here we see him taking another Naboo ship. And I actually really liked that choice. The Naboo were always sort of ride or die. They also have really cool sounding blasters. And what's interesting is that unlike what I expected when he showed up, Kelleran Beck did not actually die in the scene. So I suspect we will be seeing more of him either in this season or somewhere down the line. I'm also going to say it. I don't really want this to happen, but there's the distinct possibility that he meets up with Jar Jar. Jar Jar helps move Grogu to safety. I say there's a distinct possibility because he's clearly working with the Naboo, so that puts Jar Jar right in the action, and there's a distinct possibility that Jar Jar actually helps create the system that funnels Jedi to safety, as we saw in the Kenobi show. Anyway, for me, the other really interesting moment comes at the end, where we see Bo-Katan tell the armorer that she's seen the Mythosaur, and it was sort of hard for me to read the armorer's reaction to this. She definitely had the vibe of course you did, sure, why don't you lie down and take a rest? Obviously, she doesn't believe her at the beginning. Near the end, I'm still not sure whether she thinks Bo-Katan is speaking in metaphors or in vision, or whether she actually believes her. I also still can't get a good grip on how Bo-Katan feels about this. There's definitely the possibility that she is falling more into the ways of this Mandalorian cult, but I don't know. So much of season 1 and 2 was about Din Djarin breaking away from his dogma, why he took off his helmet for the right reasons, how there was nothing wrong with that. I find it difficult to believe that the show is going to go back on all of that bad and say, actually, the cult's kind of a good thing. And, following this strict doctrine is good, actually. I still think it's more likely that she sees the potential in the Mandalorian group as a fighting force. And I think that's sort of hinted at by how she's looking at them all training at the very beginning. But I really don't know. And it's definitely one of the more compelling aspects of the show right now. That being said, while there were some good things in the episode, I do think the execution overall was a little bit lacking, especially, the moments between those good parts. I already talked about how aspects of hunting the Shriek was a bit weird, waiting a day before trying to rescue Paz Vizsla's son. I thought overall some of the special effects were a bit meh. Coruscant outside looked really good, but inside of the Jedi Temple has always been a bit off, and I'm assuming that's mostly because portions of it were filmed during and for Kenobi. But the special effects at the beginning were also a bit weak. I'm guessing that this was probably an episode which was allocated a little less budget overall, then ended up spending a ton of budget on the Coruscant chase, which again, I actually thought that looked really good with some, minor nitpicks. For example, they're flying through the tunnel, the lat is shooting at them, then there's a shot where you can see in front of them, there's no explosions, no anything, the shots just disappear, and the big creature stuff. But I don't know, I didn't think the action or the acting in the initial section was great. The Mandalorians are sort of just standing on the shore, like doing whatever, kind of incoherently training. I thought parts overall were stiff. I didn't think Grogu's fight looked great. I thought some of the special effects when he was playing with those little crabs, although a cool idea, wasn't handled the best. Definitely not like my least favorite episode, but certainly not in the top tier. I don't really know where I'd place it, but it felt quite unfocused. That'd be my biggest thing. It felt quite unfocused, and I don't really have an issue with the length. The length was okay, and I also don't feel like it was really a throwaway episode either, but the execution definitely fell off. That was my main issue. That's just my thoughts, though. I'm looking forward to reading yours down below. Let me know, did you like this episode? What do you think is going on with the Shrieks? Did you like the reappearance of Ahmed Best? Let me know all of that and more, of course, in the comments. And make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, check out my clips channel. We post Mandalorian or Star Wars clips almost every day. We're covering the Bad Batch as well today, which I'm not going to get a chance to here, and that episode was really good. We also do have a Marvel channel blowing up. It's called Professor X, ECKS. Very, very clever name. My friend Zach is really doing a great job with that one. I'll put links to both on screen.